Ellie story, the last chapter, chapter 18. It was dark in the tunnel. I wasn't even sure which way to swim. My nose broke the surface, and I gasped in a breath, choking as black water surged into my mouth. The top of my head scraped against the tunnel, and then the water pulled me down again, wrestling with me, rolling me over and over. I'd wrestled with Jacob and Al, with Maya, with my littermates long ago. That had been fun. This wasn't. I was being tumbled and dragged, not even sure where the water was going or how I could swim to shore. And Jeffrey's scent was here too, washed this way and that by the current. I could catch a hint of it, and then it would disappear. But I knew he was ahead of me, soundlessly fighting for his life. Suddenly, the water pulled me downhill. When my head surfaced again, I was able to paddle. The tunnel we'd been pulled through had joined another, larger one. The current was flowing through this tunnel even more quickly, but since it was bigger, there was more airspace above the water. I swam as hard as I could toward the smell of Jeffrey. I couldn't see him, but my nose told me he was close, perhaps only a yard or two away. Then the smell vanished. I knew he had gone under. When Jacob had been under the water, I dived down to reach him. It'd been the right thing to do. He'd praised me. He'd called me a good dog. I had to do the same thing for Jeffrey. I took a breath and forced myself under the surface of the water, paddling hard. That time before, I'd been able to see Jacob beneath me. Now I could see nothing as Jeffrey and I were both swept along, but I knew he was there, tumbling just beneath me. I strained, my mouth open, blind, and then I reached him. I had the hood of Jeffrey's rain slicker in my mouth. I heaved with my back legs and dug with my front paws. Together, Jeffrey and I burst through the surface of the water. I heard him coughing and choking as I kept his hood between my teeth. I was gagging myself, trying to get rid of the water in my throat without opening my jaws. Whatever happened, I would not let Jeffrey go. I could not swim in any direction except the one the water was already going. All my paddling feet could do was keep us both up so that we could breathe. At first, Jeffrey tried to help as well by kicking his feet, but as we raced along the black tunnel, he slowly stopped. His body sagged down into the water, pulling down on the hood. I struggled to keep us both from sinking, but it was harder and harder. My jaw and neck were aching, and my legs were slowing. How was I going to save Jeffrey? I'd found him, but that wasn't enough. The water was going to drag both of us under unless I could get him somewhere safe. But where was safe? There was only the rushing water and the hard concrete of the tunnel surface. Some weak light from far ahead flickered over the tunnel's walls and the water surface. Light. That was good. Light might mean sunlight. It might mean Maya. It might mean people who would help save us. The light grew stronger, and the sound grew louder along with it. It was a deep, humming roar, and the walls of the tunnel echoed it back at us until it filled my ears. I tightened my grip on Jeffrey's hood. Something was about to happen. But what? The light grew brighter and brighter all around us, and suddenly we burst out into daylight, tumbling down a cement chute and landing with a splash in a swiftly flowing river. The force of the splash forced us both under, but luckily my back legs touched something firm beneath me, a rock, perhaps, as I shoved us up. Jeffrey couldn't help me at all. He was limp, his head rolling from side to side as the waves pushed us. Water splashed over my head and into my nose. I forced my legs to move faster. We were out in the light now. There had to be somewhere safe that I could go. The banks of the river had been lined with cement, so that the current pulled us between two slanting walls. I tugged Jeffrey toward one bank, but the current fought with me, trying to pull us both back into the center of the river. The ache in my neck and jaw was getting worse. What if I lost my grip? Then flashes of light caught my eye. Downstream, men with raincoats and flashlights were running toward the bank of the river. They were too slow, weren't they? And the river was too fast. Jeffrey and I would be pulled past them before they could get to us. I heaved against the greedy water. It was trying to suck us down, to claim Jeffrey, but he was mine. I had found him. I wasn't going to give him up. Slowly, I began to inch us both closer to the bank where the men were running. Two of the men plunged into the water. They were tied together with a rope, and the rope ran back to the other men waiting on the bank. The two in the water waded out, hip deep, straining their hands to catch us, but we were not close enough. The water would sweep us past them. No, I wouldn't let it. I dug in with my claws as if the water were dirt, and I could dig it out of my way. I paddled and heaved and put everything I had into aiming for the men's arms. Gotcha! One of them shouted as Jeffrey and I slammed into them. The people on the bank braced themselves as our weight pulled the rope taut. But no one fell. One of the men in the water grabbed my collar. The other man seized Jeffrey around his waist and hoisted him into the air. I let Jeffrey's hood go. I knew he was safe now. I'd found him, and I'd taken him to people. I'd done my job. The man kept holding my collar tight and throwing his weight against the pool of the quickly flowing water. The man on the bank pulled too, and together the four of us thrashed our way to the shore. I was the last in the water. The man who held my collar was hoisted out, but he never let me go. Lying on the concrete, he pulled and heaved at me, and I scrambled at the steep bank with my tired, aching legs, and somehow I was out. I flopped down on the marvelous solid ground and spat water out of my mouth. Several of the men were huddled around Jeffrey. I saw one squeeze his skinny chest, and a gush of brown water came out of his mouth, and then he was coughing and crying. I heaved myself up with a cough and a sigh. It seemed my job was not quite over yet. People were supposed to be happy to be found. Jeffrey was not happy. I limped over to him without enough strength even to shake the water off of my drenched fur. I lay down heavily next to Jeffrey, and he threw himself onto me, hugging my wet fur with all the strength that he had left. I could feel him shaking. The fear was beginning to drain out of him, though, and my fear was going along with it. Jeffrey was going to be okay. I had done my work again. I was a good dog. Jeffrey kept holding on to me as the men around us pulled off his slicker and his shirt and his soggy jeans and wrapped blankets around him. "You'll be okay, boy. You'll be okay," one of them said. "Is this your doggie? She saved your life." Jeffrey didn't answer, but he lifted his head to look into my eyes. I licked his cheek with one quick swipe of my tongue. "Let's go," someone shouted. And one of the men gently pulled Jeffrey's hands loose from my fur. They picked Jeffrey up and ran with him up the hill to a street. When they loaded him into a white truck, it took off with its siren screaming. I stayed where I was. My legs were shaking with tiredness, and it was all I could do to lift my head enough to vomit out the river water that had gotten into me. Then I put my head down on my paws and lay still, the cold rain pelting me. The siren of a police car wailed, getting louder, coming closer. I glanced up the hill without lifting my head. "Ellie!" Maya screamed. She slid and scrambled down the hill to my side. I was too tired to wag my tail, but I was glad to see her. If she wanted to play tug-of-war, though, it might have to wait until later. Maya was soaking wet. Tears and rainwater were mixing on her cheeks. She hugged me nearly as tightly as Jeffrey had done. "You're a good dog, Ellie. You saved Jeffrey. You're such a good dog. I thought I'd lost you, Ellie." After a while, Maya stopped crying and helped me up the hill, holding my collar and talking to me gently. With her arms around my chest, she hoisted me up into the back seat of the police car, and we drove straight to the place where the man in the white coat looked me over from my nose to my tail. I spent the night there, which I wasn't too happy about. But in the morning, I got to go back to Maya and Al's house. I was so stiff for the next few days that I could hardly move, but everything else was back to normal. A few weeks later, Maya and I did school again, only this time the big room was filled with grown-ups, not children. We sat up on a stage with lights in our eyes while a man talked in a loud voice. I wondered when Maya was going to talk and if grown-ups would come and pet me as the children always did, but that didn't seem to be the plan this time. After he was done talking, the man came over to see me and put a second collar around my neck. I wondered why he was bothering to do this. I had my collar on already. And this other one was flimsy and silly. It hung too loosely, and it had a big, heavy metal dog tag on it that banged against my chest when I walked. The man also pinned something on Maya's uniform, and everybody clapped. She knelt down beside me while even brighter lights flashed around us, like lightning with no thunder. It wasn't as interesting as work or as real school, but I felt Maya's pride and love as she whispered that I was a good dog. Then Maya got back up. Ellie, come, I have a surprise for you. She walked with me off the stage. All of the people who had been watching us were now standing up, talking in groups. A lot of them stopped to talk to Maya or shake her hand, and she smiled back happily, but she kept moving. I stayed by her side. Then she stopped. There, Ellie, see? I looked through legs, most of them in dark blue pants, and I saw why Maya had brought me here. A man was standing by himself, wearing a suit and tie with a small smile on his face. The man was Jacob. Maya let go of my leash, and I bounded over to him. He stooped down, scratching my ears. How are you, Ellie? Look how gray you're getting. He turned to a woman standing a little way behind him with a girl in her arms. The girl looked to be a year or two younger than Jeffrey, and her grin was far wider than Jacob's. Daddy used to work with Ellie, the woman holding her said. Did you know that, Alyssa? Yes, the girl said, squirming to get down. I want to pet Ellie. Can't you, Jacob? The woman asked. Of course. Alyssa ran forward and hugged me. I braced myself so she would not tip me over, and I licked her face. She giggled, and Jacob laughed. I'd never heard Jacob laugh like that before. Over Alyssa's head, I looked at Jacob. He was so different from when I'd lived and worked with him. The coldness aside had gone away. I'm glad you're doing this community outreach program, Jacob told Maya. A dog like Ellie needs to work. I heard the word work and wagged my tail as Jacob came and knelt down beside Alyssa and me. But there was no urgency in the word, no sense that we were about to find anyone. Jacob just always talked about work. That was his way. Maya hovered in the background, exchanging smiles with the woman who had been holding Alyssa. She was the girl's mother, I realized, and Jacob was the girl's father. He had a family now, and he was happy. That's what was different. In all the time I had known him, Jacob had never been happy. I never thought that Jacob might be lost or might need saving. He was the one who helped me save other people. But now it almost felt as if Jacob had finally been found. We've got to get you home, honey, the woman said to the girl. Can Ellie come? Alyssa asked. Everybody laughed. It was nice to be there with both Maya and Jacob. I eased down to the floor, so happy I thought I might take a nap. Ellie, Jacob said. He bent down and took hold of my face gently, looking into my eyes. The feel of his rough hands on my fur took me back to when I was a puppy, first learning my work. I wagged my tail, thumping it on the floor. I knew that soon I'd go home with Maya, that my place and my work was with her now, but I was still full of love for this man. Good girl, Jacob said, gently, and I heard tenderness in his voice. I could tell that he loved Alyssa and her mother. For the first time, I could sense that he also loved me. Good dog, Jacob told me. Ellie, you're a good dog.